All right, so I know I was where France was. So the Germans want to go ahead and strike at France. They feel like that would be the one that they will be able to get into quicker, easier, and take over. So Germany issued an ultimatum to neutral Belgium. Allow the German soldiers to pass through Belgium, which is a neutral area, and declare war on France on August 3rd. So Germany goes ahead with this plan. They reinforce their line here in the east, and they go ahead and they decide to invade through Belgium, which they kind of do a raid, because remember at this time period armies do live off the land. So as they're marching, they do eat and consume anything that's in the area, and they get into France. So Britain feels that they have no choice but to go ahead and declare war on Germany, and they declare war August 4th. So 1914, by August, you really have all the European countries that are going to be in this war. And so what ends up having to happen is that Britain is going to become the big military. They're going to become the big force, because this is Britain and this is France. And so if you're the German army and you're here, the next thing you could do is launch an invasion of Britain. And so that's not going to sit well with them. The Russians were told to go ahead and demilitarize. So the Germans told Russia, you got 12 hours to demilitarize, but the Russians are not going to do it. They mobilize and they're on the move. So the Russians are going to mobilize and they're going to go ahead and basically we've got a huge war that's starting. So they just feel, the Germans feel that the French are just going to not put up that much of a resistance to them. So here's what ends up actually happening. So you've got Germany going through Belgium. They get into France, and by the time they get into France, we're going to have these things called trenches. And so this World War I is known as a trench warfare war. Britain feels that they absolutely have no ultimatum. They really do have to go ahead and declare war. And so neutral Belgium was violated by the Germans, and the British are going to use this in their propaganda. Their pictures are going to show a devastated Belgium. They're going to show a Belgium that was raped, that was pillaged, and they're going to even call the Germans barbarians, Mongols, every nasty name you can think of, they're going to throw at the Germans for what they did in Belgium. But they've got to do that because they've got to get soldiers to go ahead, get motivated, nationalistic, so that they can win. They also got to get people who aren't soldiers to enlist. They would also like to get this country over here across that big ocean to go ahead and get involved. So Britain is really going to put a lot of pressure on the United States to also join. So the Allied forces will be Britain, France, and Russia. Eventually the United States will come into the war. They come in 1917. And then you have the Central Powers, which is going to be really Germany, Austria, and the Ottoman Empire, which you guys know as the Ottoman Turks, the sick man of Europe. They're going to be in here. So when you look at Germany and you look at actually who they picked for their alliance system, it probably wasn't the best. They're picking the Habsburg Empire, the Austrians, which is kind of already a weak area. It's not an area that's ever been able to really politically, religiously unify the places that they've been taking over. And then you got the Ottoman Turks, who are about on their way out as an empire. So they just maybe didn't make the best choices. So the Great War. When you look at 1914 to 1915, we get illusions and stalemates. So the Central Powers, Germany, Austria, the Ottoman Empire. The Allies is going to be Britain, France, Russia. Italy will be also a part of this, and then the U.S. will join in 1917, and Russia exits in 1917 because they're going to have a revolution. So when you look at the pre-war time, it's a rational diplomacy. They want to preserve peace, and wars are too costly to fight. But by August 1914, they've been building up their military, and everybody's really excited about trying out all these brand new technologies that they've been inventing. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm. They think that the war is only going to last a few weeks because these are people who obviously have no rational thought in their head. You cannot be building up a military for 20 years and think that, oh, the war is only going to go a few weeks. But people really thought this. I mean, they thought that about the American Civil War here. You had Southerners and Northerners that thought, the war starts in April. They thought that by the end of summer they'd be home. 4 years later, you're still having problems. It's just this is how wars are. The plan that Germany planned, the Schlieffen plan, it did not really work out well for Germany. The German army is going to be halted 20 miles from Paris, and it's the Battle of the Marne. And the reason they're going to be halted is thanks to this whole trench warfare. And the German army doesn't exactly follow the plan, so they kind of make a little bit of adjustments. And so when they get halted, September 6th through the 10th, it's going to be resulting in a stalemate. A stalemate is basically where neither side's winning and neither side is actually losing. So the Germans are there, they're in France, but the French people rally around Paris and they dig in trenches, they dig in holes in the ground, and they hide. And in these trenches, they got barbed wire, they've got bombs everywhere, they got cannons behind them, they're going to have machine guns. Trench warfare is going to make the war go a lot longer than it should. So trench warfare is the result, and little change on the Western Front for the next 4 years. Because if you get out of the trench, you die. So most of the soldiers are actually going to hide in the trenches for the next 4 years. And if you're not really fighting and you don't really have any battles going on, you can't say that you're winning. You can't say that you're losing either. In the East, there's a little bit more mobility. So when you look at the Western Front, you have thousands of miles of trenches, and people learn how to live in a trench. But when you look at the East, the Russians are a little bit more mobile. The Russian army is huge, and it's just because Russia's got a large population. They really also don't care how many soldiers they lose in battle. So the Russians are going to be defeated at the Battle of Tannenberg. And so what you're going to have is that the Russian army is not really going to be much of a threat to the German territory. Not anymore. But you have to understand that the Russians they're hungry. They're very poor. The only ones that are actually doing well in Russia during this time period is the actual the Tsar, his family, the imperial family, and the nobles, the officers. It's not the people who are on the front line fighting. So how dedicated are you to winning? It's up to the individual. But if you are thinking about how your wife and kids don't have any food at home because you're not being able to grow it, you might not be that motivated to actually keep going. You might have a lot of desertion. So the Austrians are going to be defeated by the Russians. And remember, the Austrians just are not a very good alliance for the Germans to be put in. And they're going to be thrown out of Serbia with German aid, because Germany is going to have to take some of their soldiers from that Western Front, and they're going to have to help the Austrians. They're going to be able to push the Russians back into Russia. The Russian casualties are 2.5 million, and Russia is almost knocked out of the war because of this. This is what happens every single time the Austrians get their butt kicked. The German army's got to go ahead and take some of their soldiers and help the Austrian army. And this will be something that will happen too in World War II, is every time in World War II, it'll be Italy. Italy makes the switch in World War II. They'll be with Germany, and they'll be a part of the Axis. But when Italy actually isn't a very good army in World War II, every time they're losing, the German army has to take soldiers and they have to go help Italy. And so it's the same thing here in World War I, is that Germany has picked a pretty bad alliance system, and every time the Austrians are getting their butt handed to them, the German army has to go and try and save them. And so the German army is a pretty good army. They just chose really bad alliances. Italy has switched, in World War I, Italy is a part of the Allies, and then they make the switch. They'll make a shift in World War II. All right, so when you look at 1916 to 1917, we have this thing called the Great Slaughter. So no man's land refers to the land in between the trenches, and this is in the West. So this is trench warfare is on the Western Front. And so you look at 400 miles of trenches from Switzerland to the actual English Channel. You got barbed wire, machine guns, poison gas is going to be used for the first time in war, in World War I, and it's going to be mustard gas. And you get decomposing bodies everywhere. So whenever you get all this stuff, you've got disease, you got death, you got. I mean, it's looking at a war zone is like looking at a wasteland, and that's pretty much what this area is going to look like. It's going to look like a wasteland. The Battle of Verdun is about 700,000 casualties. So you're looking at huge casualties in each of these wars because as soon as you pop out of the trench, there you got machine gunners who are sitting waiting, they're hiding, and they're going to shoot and kill you. You got barbed wire that you would actually have to get through to get into the other person's trench or the other side's trench to actually get down there and start killing them. You got huge mud holes from the cannon fire that's constantly going on, and there's really no fresh food on the front line, so you don't really have that much energy. You got the rats and the mice everywhere, bugs, you name it. Anything that comes around death and decaying stuff is going to be there because you are constantly living on it. The widening of the war, you get a global conflict. The Ottoman Empire, the Turks, they went ahead and they joined Germany's side, which is probably not good if you're German, because they're not a very good army at the moment because the empire is on the decline. And the British are going to attempt to knock out the Ottomans at the Battle of, sorry, sorry, I had to pause the video. I really had to sneeze back. Gallipoli. And so the Battle of the Gallipoli is where the British are going to go ahead and knock out the Turks. And so, or at least they try. It's going to be a failure. But what you really are starting to see is that the alliance system that Germany has picked has not just been. It's a very weak alliance. You get this fable, Lawrence of Arabia. He's going to lead the Arabs in an uprising against the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East. So Lawrence of Arabia, he's British, and he gets that title, Lawrence of Arabia. But anyway, he's going to go ahead and help the Arabs, the Muslims, go ahead and lead a revolt against the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East. By 1918, the German colonies in Africa have been taken, and they've been taken by Britain and France. So you see, this is part of the reason why it's called a world war. You got the war going on in Europe, but you also have the colonies that are also fighting, and you have the colonies that are going to get attacked. I mean, like, think about it when you're looking at the Punic Wars and you're looking at ancient Rome. One of the things that Hannibal did is he went ahead and he started to, attack Rome. And so what the Romans did is they started to attack his city. I mean, this is what people will do. So if they can't get you where you are, they go to some other weaker place that you have. And so the British and the French are taking out the German colonies in Africa. And so now you're Germany and you're having to fight here on the Western Front, you're fighting on the Eastern Front, and now your colonies are being raided and taken by Britain and France because they're being able to divide up their armies, they're being able to divide up their navies that much. And they're also getting help from the United States. By 1918, the United States has joined the war, and it's considered a turning point. The Russians will be out of the war by 1918. They'll sign a separate treaty with Germany, which will say that they basically they want a ceasefire. They're out because they're having the Russian Revolution or the Bolshevik Revolution during the time period. France has drafted 170,000 Africans, and the British are going to use Indians, Australians, and the New Zealanders, their colonists, as far as the war goes too. So you even have these big European countries pulling in the colonists to help them out. The Chinese and the Vietnamese are also going to be making things for the war. So they're going to make weapons, they're going to make supplies so that the Allies have stuff. The United States will also do the same thing, will be the arsenal of defense, where the U.S. is going to do war supplies for Britain, France, and Russia when Russia's in there, but they make them pay. And please understand the other stuff, they're all making them pay. It's not like you get it for free. Japan's going to join the Allies, and pretty much the only reason why they're joining is because they have imperial ambitions and they want to take over the German territories in China, as well as some other island areas, Marshall Islands, the Marinara Islands, and then the Caroline Islands. So they want to take over those little islands in the Pacific area as well. So what you kind of see going on is that